develop a plan for how you're going to get there. And it's not tomorrow, it's today. What am I going to do right now?
Drew Bledsoe, such an honor to have you on here at the Man of War podcast. I've been trying to get you on here for some time. I was a big Dolphin fan, so I saw you play for many years, and just an honor to have you on.
Yeah, man, it's my pleasure. I was always jealous. I got to be honest, man. I was a Dolphins fan growing up, and I was always jealous. Matter of fact, Jim Kelly and I we would always give Marino all kinds of grief. Because he's down there in South Beach, man, like slinging the football around. It's warm, it's sunny all the time. We both told him at different times, like, dude, if you really want to impress us, come throw for all those yards up in Buffalo or New England, where we are, because it was not quite the same thing.
No doubt, man. You had a phenomenal career. You were what, a four-time Pro Bowler?
Yeah, four times. Yeah, four times. Should have been six, but whatever. But no, it was a really, really just an amazing ride. Loved every bit of it, and it was childhood dream come true for sure. And I know we'll talk about it more, but it was just an amazing experience.
Awesome. So what I'm going to do here is this, all right? In the Man of War podcast, we love to dig in, all right? We want to know your mindset, specifically, how you were growing up, and of course, becoming an elite athlete, going to the Super Bowl, that experience. And I also want to dive into what happened after football and the fact that, you didn't pack it in. You went out there, you became an entrepreneur, and now you're running a very successful wine company. So we're going to kind of break it down in stages like that. And I like to dive deep, and I like to kind of get to know you and know exactly what you're made of. And we'll even talk about some of your daily rituals, how you stay in shape and how you stay, on the edge for sure.
Right on.
All right, bro. All right. So take us back a little bit. You grew up, and was football something that you always wanted to do? I mean, did your parents kind of put you in a football team? And
it's funny. My dad coached football, high school football. So I was kind of always around the game. I didn't get to play any organized football until seventh grade, which was it was a long wait, man. You're out chucking the ball around at recess and playing with your buddies, and then there really wasn't, where I was growing up, there wasn't even flag football in any kind of organized fashion. So I had to wait, but until seventh grade before I actually got to play any ball. But played all the sports. It wasn't a football centric thing. I think in sixth grade, I think I played six different sports. Soccer, basketball. I wrestled. I was on the swim team. I ran track. Played baseball. So it was just we were just active out. Doing all kinds of stuff.
Amazing. So talk to me. You played high school, then you went into college, and you became. Talk to me about your college years.
Yeah, that was cool, man. Growing up in this little tiny town, Walla Walla, Washington, out in the middle of the wheat fields in southeastern Washington, it was really a cool place to grow up. But there was not a ton of exposure. Like I had actually, I had a good high school career, but but I had to go actually actively work to get recruited, outside of just, my backyard. So yeah, Dad and I went and put together VHS tapes, sitting down there with two, two VCRs side by side, and dubbing the stuff over, and sent the tapes out to, a variety of schools, and ended up taking trips to Washington, University of Washington, Washington State, Stanford, and then I took a trip to Miami because the coach at Miami was Dennis Erickson, who previously had been at Washington State, so he knew about me. I knew I wasn't going to go all the way across the country, go to school. I knew I wasn't going to Miami, but I certainly wasn't turning down the opportunity to take a trip in the middle of the wintertime from, little tiny Walla Walla, Washington, all the way down to Miami. But went off to ultimately elected to go to Washington State, basically for one very specific reason. I just fell in love with a coach, Mike Price, who is still a great friend to this day. Loved playing for him. Got there as 18, you know, felt like I probably was pretty good at ball, but didn't really know. But ended up starting halfway through my freshman year for the Cougs. At the end of my freshman year, Mel Kiper Jr. is like the draft guru for ESPN. He kind of spoiled the rest of my college life. He said in 2 years I was going to be the #1 overall draft pick. So I had to answer that question the rest of my college career, which ended up being 2 more years. So I just went to school for 3 years and played ball for 3 years, and then elected to jump into the NFL draft.
So tell me, at what point did you realize that you had a tremendous arm, that you were accurate, that you were kind of standing out amongst, all other quarterbacks? Did it hit you, or was it something that you just, never took for granted?
It's interesting. I grew really fast, man. So I was skinny, big feet. Was certainly not the guy that you looked at like in the 9th grade and said, "Hey, that guy's going to be a professional athlete." It's just that was like the baby giraffe. Trying to figure out where all my pieces and parts were. But my sophomore year of high school, we went to this football camp. There were a number of NFL guys there, but one of the guys that was there was Neil Lomax, who was a Pro Bowl quarterback for the Cardinals at the time. And at the end of one of the sessions, he would go throw, and so you're watching, this Pro Bowl quarterback out there throwing. Well, a couple of us got up to go throw with him, and so we're kind of side by side. Well, so I was 15 at the time, and it had really sort of all come together that year in terms of my ability to throw the ball. And so I'm up there throwing with Neil, and I'm kind of going toe to toe with this NFL quarterback as a 15-year-old. And in some cases, maybe even out throwing him. And so Neil finally turns to me and goes, "All right, you can go sit down." Like, actually told me to go sit down because I was, and that was sort of the moment where I was like, oh, well, maybe my ability to chuck this football around is different than other people's. And then from there, kind of had to grow into it and learn how to put it all together. But yeah, I was blessed. I had some good natural ability, but also had just some great mentors early on that taught me how to do things the right way. And then I worked, really hard at it. And you put all those things together, and allowed me to be better than most.
All right. So I want to touch a little bit on that. When you say worked really hard, give me an idea of, and this is for the younger guys that are coming up, give me an idea of the time that you put in. And because I got to believe, as as a young guy, college and then high school, young athlete, I mean, it's like, all kids, they want to party, they want to go out there, they want to do other things, even though they're good athletes. They don't get sometimes to a level where they could if they worked really hard at it, if they had that mental toughness. Talk to me a little bit about maybe some of the experiences that you had when you were a little bit younger, and how you pushed yourself.
Yeah, sure. It was there were sacrifices for sure. I mean, I didn't really party in high school. I would sometimes go to the parties, but I was the guy that was driving everybody home and making sure everybody was taken care of. So, I wasn't one of the cool kids from that standpoint. But before that, going back to 8th and 9th grade, in the springtime, thankfully I had one partner in crime. Ended up being my best receiver all the way through high school, Andy Jameson. But we would, in like 8th and 9th grade, we would get up before school, which back then, boy, I really liked to sleep. So, giving up my sleep was truly a sacrifice, when I was that age. And we'd get up before school at 6:37 in the morning, and we'd go to Bernie Elementary School, and we'd go throw for an hour. And Andy would run around, so I'd throw for an hour not every morning, but probably 3 days a week before school. And then, then all summer, and it was not ever a situation, for me where I ever had to be told to go do something or ever had to be pushed to go do something. It was something that I chose to do. And it was, first of all, I liked it. But second, I really wanted to be good at it. And, somehow I figured out early on that if I really wanted to be good at it, I couldn't do the same things everybody else did, because then I was the same as everybody else. So I decided if I was truly going to be, at least attempt to be exceptional, I had to do the things that other people weren't doing.
That's great. So you kind of gave up some of the party time and sacrificed a lot of things to get to where you were. I mean, that's for all you younger kids out there that are coming up, and especially my 15-year-old going to turn 16, for basketball, the time is you got to, you got to put it in, you got to go out there, and sometimes you got to sacrifice the time with your friends and, to get to a certain level. All right. So let's take me down the road now. You're in college. All right. And it is the time when you decide to go pro. How did that, tell me, I want to know the environment, how that was at that time, and, people around you and agents, and talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, it truly was not an easy decision. You look back in retrospect and you're like, okay, well, you were the number one overall pick. Of course, you made the right decision and left early, which, I think that's probably the case. But shoot, I was not yet 21 years old when I made that decision, and I was giving up, the freedom and security of being in college, particularly when you're on a college athletic team that you're really well taken care of. There's not a lot of stress outside of working hard and getting to class. But thankfully, I've got great support from mom and dad. They've always been just great sounding boards. Again, they've never really pushed me in any particular direction, but they were always great listeners and helped me to work through decision making and so on. And then that coach that I fell in love with Mike Price, when I decided to go to Washington State, even though he was losing his quarterback, he was entirely supportive of the decision that I made to leave early. We sat down and talked about it together. When I had my press conference, he was up there and was, he was just extremely proud, the opportunity that I had, which, some coaches, they might pay it lip service, say, hey, at least we had him for 3 years or whatever. But Mike was really not that way. And he was entirely supportive, the whole way through, and is still a great friend to this day.
That's great. All right. So talk to me that first day on the draft, you get selected number one. How were you feeling? Your family around you? You knew you were stepping up to the big leagues. I can only imagine where you had butterflies in your stomach. This is a huge step going from college to the pros. Talk to me a little bit about that.
It was pretty crazy. My parents were both school teachers growing up, right? So, we had a great upbringing, loved it, but it wasn't like there was a ton of money floating around. And the reason I say that that's interesting, because the first time that our family, I just have one brother. The first time that the four of us were ever on an airplane together was when we flew out for the draft. So we left our little town and flew to New York. None of us had ever been to the city, to New York anyway. And so we're there. We got in late at night. We're out walking around Times Square, looking up at the big buildings. I tell people it was like the Waltons go to New York. It was really pretty funny. Yeah. Got there, and then the next day was the draft itself, which I mean, it was a big deal then, but it was not like it is now, man. Now it's just like this 5-day spectacle. Back then it was just a couple days. But we were looking up in the green room, which was back behind the stage, and sitting back there with my folks and my brother, and it happened really, really quickly. They announced the start of the draft, and very soon after the start of the draft, Paul Tagliabue gets up and says, "Hey," says with the first pick in the 1993 NFL draft, that New England Patriots select Drew Bledsoe out of Washington State University. And so I pop up, and my mom's kind of trying to figure out what is going on, and my dad's trying to get the video camera off of his hand. And so I ended up hugging my agent of all people when I got announced. But then it became a true whirlwind, because right after the draft in New York, was zipped up to Boston, and did all kinds of press and media stuff up in Boston. And probably the craziest part of the whole thing was just that you go from Walla Walla, which is about 30,000 people, and one little tiny newspaper. Then you go to Pullman, Washington, where outside of the university it's about 20,000 people. And you're just surrounded as, but very isolated, very country, and not a lot of media scrutiny and all of that stuff. And then you land in Boston, which is one of the craziest sports towns in the world. I discovered very, very quickly that in and around Boston, sports are not a pastime; they're more of a religion. And people take it very seriously. And so
Sure.
for me, it was pretty heady times trying to navigate through that. The nice thing was that all the work involved with football, and then ultimately the games, that was sort of a sanctuary, where I could get away from the craziness. If I could go in and just work at football, I knew how to do that part of it. The rest of it was pretty crazy to try to figure out.
Wow. So now here you are, you're making your first start in an NFL game. That must be a tremendous experience. I know that you prepped, studied the playbook, listened to the coaches, but I could only imagine the feel of being boots on ground on that turf.
It was so crazy, man. My first start was at Buffalo, and that was when the Bills were, I think they had just been in their third straight Super Bowl just a few months before that. And so I'm out on the field, I'm playing catch, warming up, and I see Bruce Smith come down the tunnel. And I'm like, I'm like, man, I don't belong here. I am not in the right place. I don't belong on the field with that man. I just watched him, a few months before in the Super Bowl, and then Jim Kelly comes running down the tunnel, and Jim had been one of my heroes for a long time, and all of a sudden he comes running by, but he was really good to me. Runs by, pats me on the butt, says, "Hey, good luck, Rook." And and I honestly was like, "Oh, thank you, Mr. Kelly." Like I just, it's like, can you come back so I can have an autograph? But the nice thing always was, that once the game started, then it just became football. But you had to get to the game, and the rest of it was really pretty crazy.
Wow. So after that initial game, did it kind of help you build a little bit more confidence going forward, knowing that you could hang with the big boys?
That was a progression. The first game I did actually, we didn't win the game, but I actually had a pretty decent game. And Bruce Smith actually put one of those hits on me that, well, first of all, it would be illegal today. It probably would be a fine for sure. If he hit me that way today. I had a decent game. Felt like I belonged, threw for some yards, threw for some touchdowns, and but it wasn't really probably until my second year, where when you hear people talk all the time about, things slowing down, right? Where all of a sudden, instead of being in, fast motion, all of a sudden you have enough experience, enough confidence that, the game slows down a little bit, and you feel like you can, then you can really start playing. But yeah, my second year, we started, that was when things started to kind of come together.
So going back to the first year, you think that the difference between playing college football and pro, was it the speed of the game, the complexity? What hit you the hardest there?
It was the speed and the precision required, right? So, and what that means is, from a quarterback standpoint, in high school, you had a pretty big margin for error, right? The guys weren't going to be covered that close, so you if you were a little bit late with the ball, or you weren't quite perfect with your accuracy, you could get away with it. Well, in college, those windows get a little smaller, so you don't have as much margin for error. When you get to the pros, the margin for error is so tiny. You got down the field, 25, 30 yards, and if your timing isn't perfect, and if your accuracy isn't nearly perfect, it's either going to be incomplete or intercepted. And you also, with the athletes that are coming after you on the pass rush side, you don't have that much time to figure it all out. When you can't sit back there very often and just look at it, then throw it. You have to come back. All right, that ball's got to be out of my hands, and it's got to go where it's supposed to go, very, very quickly and accurately. So it just requires a different level of precision, when you get to the top level.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about your ups and downs, winning and losing. How does that affect you as an athlete, where you're out there, you're an elite athlete, and you go out there and have a shitty game?
Mm-hmm.
Right? You throw, 2-3 picks, get sacked, fumble the ball. You just have a game where you just need to, put it behind you. Talk to me about how you did that.
Yeah, first of all, when you're the quarterback, you're kind of the face of the whole thing, and so if it goes well, then you pass it all along to the guys. If it doesn't go well, you put it all on your shoulders. That's just kind of how the way things work, and that's part of the job if you're doing it the right way. But in terms of handling handling adversity, it has to be something that you learn to embrace and thrive in. Because if you can't handle adversity, and if you can't build off of your setbacks, man, you're not going to last very long. Because for the very pick a guy who it's gone really, really well for. There's nobody that's played that position that hasn't had some pretty significant adversity at some point. And if you don't learn to embrace that adversity, you're just not going to last very long. One of the things that we talk about, within our company now, we talk about embracing adversity. And that doesn't mean we go try to create it. Nobody's out there trying to fuck up on purpose. But we actually, whenever we have something that does go sideways, in our business, we know that we're going to come out the other side as a better company. And so whenever something like that happens, I'll talk to Josh, who's our CEO, and they're like, okay, well, that sucked. But man, we're going to be better for it tomorrow, right? Or next week. But one of the other things, though, that is truly difficult that goes along with that, is handling success. that can oftentimes be even more difficult in terms of continued improvement than failure. When you fail, it can be, in some ways, it can be kind of cathartic. It can be, and it's also fairly easy to improve upon failure. It's like, okay, I screwed up, so that's obvious, so I can't do that again, right? I've got to figure out how to not screw up again. But when you succeed, that's sometimes harder to build on and improve, because you don't have that obvious, bar where, well, okay, that was bad, so now I'm going to go do something different so it's good. Well, what if I do something good and I still want to get better? Sometimes that can be a more difficult proposition, and it's something that we talk about with our company, because our company has had a lot of success, but the last thing that we want to do is sit still and get caught. And so we're continuously talking about how we can build on success.
Awesome. That definitely, those are elements that anyone could take and really use in any facet of their life. That mental toughness, which is great, the way that you kind of put it out there. Now, talk to me a little bit about what happens to an athlete when, he goes through that building time. You have your building blocks, you're growing, and then all of a sudden they get an injury, and that setback happens. And they're trying to recover and get back in the game, and you got doctors telling them yes, and then he wants to talk to me about that.
Yeah, it's part of the game. People get hurt. It's a physical game. I do always correct people, though, when they make the comparison of football to like going to war, going to battle, because while there are some similarities, at the end of the day, we're playing a game, and when you're going to come home, you're at the end of the game. You may be banged up, you may sprain an ankle or blow a knee or something, but nobody's dying playing football. So I always correct people when they say, we're going to war. Well, no, you're not going to war. There's no bullets. This is still it's a very physical game, but it's still a game. But that adversity, for me, I really hadn't missed. I missed a couple of games my rookie year. But outside of that, I hadn't missed any games, in a long, long time. And all of a sudden, my ninth year, second game of my ninth year, I get an injury. Get hit, and I'm had a concussion. I was bleeding out internally, and I went back in the game. I didn't know I was bleeding out internally when I went back in the game, and then after the game, trainer grabs me and says, "Hey, you need to come with me, bub." And I'm just going to go in for prayer, and then I'll come see you. He goes, "No, you don't look very good. Why don't you come with me?" Well, next thing you know, I'd wake up in the hospital at Mass General, and turns out I was bleeding out internally about 1 liter an hour, and had to stick a tube in my chest and recycle the blood and put it back into me. And I was in the hospital for 6 days with a tube in my chest, and then wasn't able to do anything for about 6 weeks. But after a couple months, I got clearance to come back and play. Well, in the interim, my backup quarterback, this Tom Brady kid out of Michigan, had started to play fairly well, and the team was really playing well. So I get back, and after being the franchise quarterback and the figurehead of the organization for 8+ years, all of a sudden my job's not there waiting for me when I get back. Man, that was a bitter pill to swallow. It was like the first, it was the first time that I was looking at it and I wasn't going to be the guy, and so I had to go, take that backup role and help support somebody else. And now, thankfully, Tommy was a guy that I, then and now just, love and respect, and it's made it easier to do that because it was him. But man, that was still a really, really hard thing to, to take a step back and learn how to support a team from that role rather than being the guy that was in the middle of it. And thankfully Tommy was nice enough to sprain his ankle in the AFC Championship game and let me in there against the Steelers, and we won that one. So at least I got to play for a little bit down the stretch, helped get us to the Super Bowl, and then the next year I got to go to Buffalo, which was awesome. People think that people think from the outside when you go to Buffalo, you're being exiled, right? It's like, oh my God, you got exiled to Buffalo. But man, we loved playing there. It was like playing pro football in a college town for 3 years, man. I loved it, really loved it in Buffalo. And then my last 2 years were down in Dallas with the Cowboys. So I got to go play for the Cowboys, which, the only thing I can equate it to in sports would be pitching for the Yankees. When you're the quarterback for the Cowboys, people either love you or they hate you, but nobody's ambivalent about the quarterback for the Cowboys. And so yeah, it was. I mean, it was a cool ride. It had its adversities, but even the tough times were really spectacularly cool because you're dealing with these adversities and these setbacks in front of millions of people. And you're going to either sink or swim based on your own abilities, your own strength, and your own mental strength, with a lot of people watching. I mean, it was a cool challenge, and I really embraced it and loved every bit of it.
The incredible thing is, okay, so Tom Brady comes in, and you come out off an injury. Down the road, you go to Buffalo, and you don't let none of that shit get you down. You become a Pro Bowler in Buffalo. That's some legit shit right there. Okay, you don't let it get you down. You continue forging ahead. You continue being the best version of yourself. You go out there, you put in the time, you put in the work. So that's something that's very admirable. All I can say is, I admire your relentless passion for the sport when you played it. And you were definitely a guy that I watched play many, many times. All right, so talk to me here. So football finished for you. And your next step in life, you decided to go down a road where it's a pretty cool road. Talk to me about your company now.
Yeah, it was interesting for me because we one of the things that happened while I was playing, my wife and I started to get into wine. So we started to try and learn about wine around the world, and collect some wines and figure that out. And it just became a really interesting thing to me. But the cool piece was that my little hometown, Walla Walla, where I grew up, had become one of the great grape growing regions of the world. And it was cool for me because I could prove it, right? I'd have guys come over to the house. Every time they came over, I was like, yeah, just bring a bottle of red wine. And so they would go grab something from Napa or something from Bordeaux, or sometimes guys would branch out and go to like Argentina or something. But it's primarily, Napa and a little bit of French stuff. They'd come over to the house and we would do blind tastings at the house where we'd put all the wines in paper bags and we would taste through all the wines and just simply try to figure out what we liked the best. Well, every time we did that, I would sneak something from my hometown into the lineup. And every time we did that, when we did the big unveil at the end where we take all the wines out of the bags, the Walla Walla wine would win. Against like these expensive wines from California and France, my little hometown was making the wines that were winning these blind tastings. So for me, it was sort of like that was when the light bulb went off. Like, okay, well, maybe this passion and hobby that we have, could become a real business. I could go back home and start a company to make wine, but not just make wine, like really attempt to make wine that would stand up on a world stage. My last year in ball was 2006 with the Cowboys. And in 2007, we launched Doubleback, launched our first winery. It was, and it's been, it's a startup business, like literally from the dirt. Planted a vineyard back in 2007. my wife and the kids, we all got our hands dirty and helped plant vines. We were mostly in the way doing that, but we at least got to say that we planted some vines. Built a company, both literally and figuratively, from the ground up. And that required, all the things that anybody that's ever started something, understands. There's adversity, there's sleepless nights, there's successes, there's failures, there's unknowns that there's so many pieces of the wine business that I didn't even know I was supposed to know. Like, I didn't even know what I was supposed to learn, let alone how to learn it. And so it's been an ongoing education. Thankfully, I've been able to, we talked a little while ago about being able to carry over some of the values and skills that allowed me to be a successful quarterback into the world of business. And there are so many commonalities. At the very, very top of that list is having the great team, having the right team around you. And for me, man, that was paramount. I didn't, like I said earlier, I didn't know what I didn't know. I knew that I was passionate for wine. I knew that we had, a profile that we wanted to find. I knew we had some good land, but outside of that, man, I relied so heavily on the team I was able to put together, to go execute on the vision that we had. And that was never more true than this last year, living through what we all lived through in 2020. I tell people, you don't really know what kind of football team you have until you face adversity, until you're behind in the fourth quarter, until you've lost a couple of games in a row. That's when you find out what kind of team you have. And that was certainly the case this last year with our team at the business. Found out what kind of character we had on our team, because in 2020, man, they just rocked it. Showed up, no complaints. Had to change the way we did everything, like everybody else did. And our team just showed up, went to work, and we had our best year ever in 2020. Because the team just performed at such a high level when they were facing adversity.
So you took a lot of the principles that you learned as an elite athlete, and you incorporated them into your culture, into your business. Let's talk a little bit about that, because I think that's a key point that we need to make here. The reality is that there's so many principles that you can use and transfer over to business. And there's a lot of people out there in this world that don't quite get that. They don't understand that, just because you have certain principles, on one end of the spectrum, doesn't mean they stay there. You can carry them over to another facet in your life. So let's talk about how you brought these principles over into your business. And then I want to talk about your family life and how you have implemented them in your family.
Yeah. It's one of the most important pieces, in comparing and carrying over from football into business, is that being really great at one thing, at one component of it, doesn't get it done. So as a quarterback, I could throw the ball well, but if all I could do was throw, and that was the only thing I was good at, I had no chance of being successful. And there are guys all over the place that can throw the ball, but that is about, 10% of playing quarterback, being able to throw the ball well. Then it's about, attention to detail. It's about leadership. It's about anticipation. It's about handling your emotions. It's about precision in everything that you do. All of those things that are more important than your ability to chuck the football. Well, in our business, we've been able to make some great wine, and the critics have been kind to us and so on, and the stuff that's in the bottle is really good, but that's only one component of it. You know, I mean, in our business, it's every last piece of it has to be executed with precision. You know, from how we farm to you know, how we treat our people. You know, we've got our own farming company, and we try to be sustainable with our people, just like we're sustainable with the environment. So our farming company, you know, our team, there are 12 of them. They're paid better than anybody else in the region. They have health benefits, retirement benefits, and we keep them on year round. So a lot of farming, you know, a lot of ag.
Wow,
You
that's
know,
great.
the farming crews are only, you know, they keep them seasonally, and then they send them and let them go, and then hire them back the next season. Well, we keep them busy all year round. We found ways to put them to work year round. So we try to be sustainable with how we treat our people as well as how we treat the environment. You know, you know, we are very, very conscientious about how we interact with our customers. Our team tries to make everybody that they interact with feel like they're part of our family, and, you know, build that emotional connection. We're very conscientious about our branding. We think a lot about how we put together our different brands and what the story is, and does that make sense? We're, you know, so anyway, you know, my point being, you know, being good at one piece of your organization doesn't cut it, particularly when you're talking about the most competitive industry in the world. By product SKU, wine's the most competitive in the world. There are 50,000 unique bottles of wine made worldwide every year, and you have to try to stand out in that crowd. So it's a really cool endeavor, and we actually have a lot of athletes on our team, which is not part of our interview process, but it ends up being culturally something that works really well for us, because, you know, we're all competitive people. We're all driven to try to be as great as we can, and you know, that requires across the board that people understand that the team is bigger than the self. That, you know, only doing your job is not going to cut it. You have to strive for perfection and go the extra mile. And because of that, man, our team is just kicking ass. So it's been really cool to see the culture continue to develop and evolve with our team.
Amazing. Great stuff right there. So talk to me about your family, your principles that you used in your business and in and the NFL and football. And have you been able to implement some of that into the growth of your family?
Well, you know, I mean, I think if you're talking about family, I had to start with my folks first. You know,
Hmm.
you know, like I say, I grew up, they were both school teachers. Had a, you know, wonderful, loving family, you know, growing up. And, you know, mom and dad are still around, and still, you know, we get to see a bunch of them. They get to see the grandkids a bunch, which is great. Um, so I had a great example growing up of what that was supposed to look like. With our family, we've got 4 kids. Oldest is 23, and you know, watching them grow up, and you know, helping to kind of, you know, give them guidance as they're coming through. You know, is the biggest and most important job I could ever do, um, you know, it never goes totally smoothly, but overall it's been a lot of fun. And now we're in that transition phase where we're actually, now you start to have, you know, adult relationships with your kids. But, you know, I mean, if I had to just say a couple of things that I learned from my folks, and then tried to implement with our family, is that, you know, number one, you know, they've got to know that every message is coming from a place of love, right? So you're never telling them something because, you know, trying to be mean dad or whatever. It's always, whether they like to hear it or not, whatever the message is, it all comes from a place of love. And so once they understand that, then you have a chance to communicate with them. And then the other part is, you know, and I know this is not always possible for everybody, but you know, I don't believe in the concept of quality time. I believe in just time. You just have to be there. You got to show up. and as much as you possibly can. And they have to know that in some cases, you make sacrifices to show up. I mean, let's be honest. I don't think very many parents have ever really enjoyed the Christmas production at school. Those are not fun things to go to. But you got to show up, and they got to know that you're there, and then watching first grade soccer. Yeah, it's not a great sporting event, but you got to. So you got to be present. And if you're present and they know that everything you say to them comes from a place of love, then you have a chance to go ahead and communicate your values and your morals to your kids. If they don't know that those two things, and they feel like you're not actually going to be present, then it's a lot harder to communicate those things.
Awesome. Good stuff there. So I'm going to leave you off with this. I would love for you to give some advice to our younger generation, or even people that are struggling to meet adversity, and that have maybe trying to get into to become an elite athlete, or someone that's trying to build a business. Give me something that they can take and use right here and right now.
Well, a couple things come immediately to mind. The first one is, go ahead and dream the big dream, right? Good. I mean, for me, being a skinny kid from Walla Walla, Washington, the NFL was not a realistic thing, right? That was just, especially if I'm telling you, if you saw me in 8th or 9th grade, you're like, oh yeah, no, work hard in school, kid, because the NFL is not for you. But no, go ahead and dream the big dream. And if you dream the big dream and you miss, well, you're still, if you aim for this and you miss and you hit here, well, you're still quite a ways up there, right? If you aim for, something down here and you hit it, you're still down here, right? So go ahead and dream the big dream. And then you've got to put that dream into action. You've got to develop a plan for how you're going to get there. And it's not tomorrow, it's today. What am I going to do right now that's going to put me moving toward that dream that's out there? If you're building something or want to work towards something that's really big, if you think about the magnitude of where you're trying to get, it can be overwhelming. But if you break that down into, okay, today I'm going to do this, right now I'm going to do this piece of it, and then you just do that over and over and over again, eventually you can build toward that. But you can't put it off. It takes action, and it takes action right now. And if you're struggling, you're dealing with adversity, which I know a lot of people are out there in normal life, and then with what's been thrust upon us this last year, the best way that I've found to get through that is to take action, and to take action immediately. Find something that you can do right now that advances you toward where you want to end up. And if you find yourself in a place where there's nothing you can do, well, then you have to truly reach out and be willing to be strong enough to accept help, and seek out, people that can help you, because asking for help when you're in a bad situation is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. We see that with, the examples of the opposite of that, that end tragically, because people get into a spot where they don't think there's a way out, and, end up harming themselves, or, deep into drugs or whatever. If you find yourself in a place like that, you owe it to the people that love you to reach out and ask for help, so that you can get back on your feet and get going.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, listen, Drew, it's been an unbelievable conversation here with you. We would absolutely love to have you back soon. There's so much knowledge and so much wisdom that we can take from speaking with you, and I just want to say, man, I'm honored to have you on. And really, one of the most important things that I took from this conversation is, your mindset is very, very spot on. You're a humble dude. You're constantly learning. And the fact is that, you made it through the big leagues. You went out there, you completed, but you're still living a life that we call, the way we say it here is, you're living a life that embodies the warrior spirit. All right. You're living a life that, you're constantly developing your business, you're growing, you're out there, you're hunting, you still have that drive, which is so important for, men in our society to really focus on. And again, thank you for being on.
Oh man, my pleasure, man. My pleasure. Great conversation, and thanks for doing what you're doing, man. This is it's a really cool thing that you're putting out to the world, and helping a lot of people. So very cool, and it was my privilege to be a part of it.
Thank you, Drew. I appreciate it.